This is the Martinus Cosmology Podcast, and my name is Mary McGovern, and I'm your host for today. And I'm very happy to welcome once again Anton Jarrod from London, who's here in Copenhagen for the weekend. Welcome, Anton.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. It's nice to be back again, Mary.
And you're here for a rather special purpose, because you have begun translating Martinus into English. And I'm very happy, as a Martinus translator myself, to welcome you to the English translation team.
Yes, absolutely. It's really good to be able to translate Martinus's work now that I've become very familiar with them, and it's a very exciting activity and thing to be doing.
Could you perhaps tell us something for your background for being able to translate Martinus? I mean, if I count the number of people I know, the number of native English speakers who have read Lives Bog, the Book of Life, all 7 volumes in Danish, I don't get past one hand. So how come you can do it?
Yes, well, it's funny because my route into translating Martinus into English actually comes through my background as a speaker of Norwegian. So I actually learned Norwegian, first of all, which, of course, as we know, perhaps other people don't know, is very similar to the Danish, especially in its written form. I learned Norwegian because I had a Norwegian partner and lived in Norway for some years, and so I learned the language that way. And this allowed me to then conduct my research and to be able to read, obviously, Norwegian and Danish. So when I came across Martinus's works, I was able to read it to the extent that I could understand Norwegian. Since then, I've also hopefully developed in my ability to understand Scandinavian languages, but it is, of course, very challenging, and Danish is, of course, a different language. And translating Martinus certainly reminds me that I am a speaker of Norwegian and not Danish, but I'm learning.
We've had a lot of fun this weekend with false friends between Norwegian and Danish, haven't we?
We have, yes, and of course they're not false until you until you it's pointed out. So, there's been a few words. For example, the one that we came across was the word mage. Mage in Danish, which is spelled M-A-G-E, and in Norwegian, that's mage, that's stomach.
And in Danish, it's spouse. So there's a bit of a difference if you love your stomach or you love your wife.
Exactly. Then, so this when you're translating this these sentences, it can be quite interesting.
So you chose to translate the Christmas Gospel as your first work. Why did you choose that particular book?
Yes, it's a good question. So it was one of the books that I came across about 4 years ago, actually, and it was one of the first works that I started to read that were not translated into English. So I'd read all the things that I could in English by this time. And then I was starting to now look at, there's other works there in Danish. So I started to read these other works, and I became fascinated by Martinus's retelling of this gospel narrative. And so I really enjoyed the book. And then a few years after that, I came back to it again when I wrote my own book about Martinus cosmology and his ideas as applied to the Gospels. So I was retelling the Gospels through this Martinus lens. And so that caused me to revisit the book again. And then when I came to think about translation as an activity and as something that could be potentially helpful or useful, I thought that since this book was not had never been translated into English, it would be good to sort of get my teeth into that work and sort of potentially help make it available. And then that began the process of talking about translating it more formally, which we've done sort of has involved, which I'm very grateful for, working with you, Mary, in terms of sort of making sure that the English translation is absolutely accurate, and that's obviously very important to make sure that work is as good as it can be.
Yeah, I think we have a good collaboration because you also give me feedback on my translations of Lives Bog. So the story behind this book, The Christmas Gospel, is that it was originally a lecture Martinus gave in December of 1944. And he later summarized it and edited this summary of his lecture to make it quite a substantial article, which covered 10 or 11 issues of what was called the contact letters, which were published in 1945 and 46.
Yeah.
So it's quite an old piece, actually, but...
Yes. And maybe I can ask you a question. I mean, why do you think he wrote it, or what do you think he was interested in communicating to his readers?
Well, I think one thing that was very important for Martinus was to shed a new light on everything to do with Christ and Christ's mission and Christianity. And not only Christ, but on other world redeemers such as Buddha, Muhammad, and so on. But he mainly refers to Christ, although he does mention the others, with great respect and love. But I think this Christmas event has been very much misunderstood, and there are levels of understanding that haven't been available to us before. He mentions very surprising things. For a book about Christmas, he talks, among other things, about sexuality as part of this Christmas story. Yes. Maybe we can get into that. He talks a lot about Christmas, and he did a lot about Christmas. He published a lot of Christmas letters. This last year we did a podcast on Martinus's Christmas letters, which people can find and go back to. He liked Christmas himself.
Yes.
Always celebrated it with friends.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the main thing is that there is a Christ child within every one of us that is in the process of being born. And this is where it's connected with sexuality, where this like the Christ child in me as a woman is this growing masculine pole. The Christ child in you as a man is this growing feminine pole. And what he calls the opposite pole in our consciousness. And this opposite pole stands for everything that has to do with humaneness, neighborly love, unselfishness, generosity. All areas of interest that are outside love of one's spouse and one's children and everything to do with family life. All one's other interests have to do with this opposite pole. So we're all really sort of pregnant with a kind of Christ child within us that's in the process of being born.
Exactly. I think that's one of the reasons why I found that this book was so interesting and is so interesting to readers, because what he does is he sort of uses the Christmas story, the story of the nativity, as a way to expound on this idea about human evolution. And for him, the Christmas nativity story is a sort of symbolizes the human being's evolution from being an animal to a real human being. And he talks about that in the book, how this is a process that happens through a whole life, through a whole cycle, and it's encapsulated and symbolized in this Christmas mystery. And the baby, the infant Jesus, is the child of God, meaning that for us human beings, we go through this process of evolution to realize that we are also children of God, sons of God, in the image of God. And this process will and is happening to all of us. And so we are all going through a nativity. We are born into the stable in low circumstances in the animal world, but we emerge as a Christ being at the end of this process, and another process begins, the real life. So I think that the book is really good at capturing all of this, all of these factors of development and evolution in a really comprehensive and effective way.
So we can look forward to the book being published around the 10th of December, both as a paperback and as an ebook. And we will announce the publication on the Martinus Institute's Facebook page and the Martinus Institute's homepage, which is martinus.dk. Thank you very much for joining the Martinus Cosmology podcast, Anton.
You're very welcome. I'm very much looking forward to this book coming out. And so there's a little bit more work to do, which hopefully we'll get through in this next month. And then, yes, we can launch and get ready to read this book in English for the first time since it was published in 1944.